So welcome to Unleashed Learning TV, helping you and your learning community boost student engagement and unlock consistent and effective teaching. Now, if you want to create a classroom or you're working to create a school where all your students feel like they belong, they're respected, and they really feel included, this episode is for you. Now, Dr. Alice Chick and Di Alperstein are here, and they're the authors of Languages of Sydney, The People and the Passion. And wherever you are in the world, not even just Sydney, they're going to share with you some important ways to understand who your students are so you can truly unleash learning for everyone. I can't tell you how important this episode is, and let's get started. So welcome. I'm really excited that you're here. I think it's so important, this book that just came out and the work that you both do. So can you help us? Before we talk about the book, can you explain to us why identities matter? Why do our student identities? Why is that so important?
Well, we talk about the starting point of learning for students, right? So what they bring into the classroom should be the starting point, and their language, their cultural backgrounds, that's their starting point. I think that's why that's important.
I love the term starting point. It's a great term for that because it helps me see my students. Like the starting point when I'm in maths is actually who they are. That's how I kind of read that. So when you're talking about identities, what are you thinking about or what are you referring to? Because I know some people are like, well, what does that mean? At Unleashed Learning, we talk about student identities and teachers' identities, but how do you think about identities?
Well, I think that we consider our identities to be our inner identities and our external identities. And I think that young people, especially in schools from multicultural backgrounds, believe that they are viewed very much externally according to the way they present themselves and the way they look. And I think that just to link this idea about identities to our book, we offer them the language silhouettes as a way to graphically represent those internal identities which they have. And I think that it's a surprise to them as well when they see how many parts there are to their internal identity. And then, as you say, it's a starting point and they can grow from that point.
Fantastic. And what's your languaging for identities? What do you think, Alice?
Mine is almost exactly the same, except I would also add that it's a way for students to think about future possibility. So to see their inner and external identities and then to think about the future. And that's what we would like our students to project, isn't it?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Now, I can, for sometimes educators will say, or people in the community will say, it's just about maths or science or English, or why do identities matter? So why do they matter? You talk about a starting point. Why do they matter in our science class or our English class or our history class? Why do student identities, their backgrounds, their race, their religion, their faith, all of that, why does that matter so much to learning?
Well, nowadays, content subjects are a lot more complicated and more wrapped in languages, in English particularly. For example, when I was young, when you do a math question, is 5 times 2, what's the answer? But now they may ask, okay, John has 2 bags of fruit and in each bag there are 5 apples. So how many apples does John have? Okay, so now instead of having 5 times 2 equals 2, you have like a 5-line narrative. So the student need to think about the narrative, have to understand the words and the language. So it's no longer just content knowledge, it's wrapped in English, in languages. And so how they perceive that narrative will be very different from just looking at the numbers and the knowledge.
Go ahead, Di, please.
Just to add to that, if we think about how many children in our classrooms come from different language groups. Alice is the expert. Would be more than half the students in many of our classrooms come from different language groups. Therefore, we have so many variables to consider. We have migrant children, children of different language level abilities. We have children from refugee backgrounds. We don't have the monolingual classroom as it was, as we envisaged it in the past. And so we have to take that into account very much in the way we differentiate our curriculum and provide for the needs of these children.
Exactly.
It's why we say who students are matters. And one of the things we talk a lot about is schema theory, because we read the world before the word, and so we've got to know who our students are to make the linkages for our students. It's a great example of the diversity of our classrooms and the ways that our students are perceiving that and connecting to the content based on who they are.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this next question, and I'm going to quote your book because I love the book so much.
Thank you.
You said this. You said, it's imperative that as teachers, we recognize and incorporate the linguistic and cultural heritage of our students in our classes. So can you give us a few ways you think about how we can do that? How can we do that?
Want to get started?
You go ahead.
Okay. I think the first step for every teachers is, if you can, take an online course of language. It's like, and now it's so easy and it's free and you can do it at your own time. So you have an idea of how challenging it could be to learn through a second language or third language. And it's a totally different experience, and you will develop a stronger sense of empathy and the idea of like, okay, if I have to do math in Arabic, what does that mean? Or in French, what does that mean there? So, and that's how our students feel doing math or science through English, the second or the third or additional language.
It makes me think that as a teacher, I've got to know that's that the reflective teacher matters.
Yes.
Like, it's not studying just the student, it's also studying myself to understand what that feels like, how I perceive it. So that's why one of the keys in our Unleashed Learning system is who the teacher is matters. So you're talking about a reflection about learning about language and understanding, negotiating that space, right?
Exactly.
So,
If I can add to that, this idea of the teacher finding out more about their students. If you look at our book on page 20, and this is about Tina's profile, and she's a student who her home language are Cantonese and English, and her additional language is Mandarin. Now the interesting thing about her is that she goes on to talk about her great enthusiasm for learning other languages. She's learning French, she's learning Japanese, she's learning Korean, and she's incorporating all those languages into her identity as a multilingual student. And the surprise for the teachers, if the teacher's capable of making that connection or being exposed to that, the teacher sees the talents that these children have, these students have, and then you can maximize them through creating that multilingual classroom.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, in our online course, we show teachers ways to understand who the students are, just like you're talking about, so we can make the linkages between who they are and how to connect to the content. And that was a perfect example of the gifts the students are bringing to the class and how to harness the gifts of who they actually are. And that increases motivation, behavior management, learning. I can go on and on and on. That's why I love your book. Okay, so let me ask you one last thing. In your book, you did linguistic and cultural, that's what you call it, silhouettes. And it really shows the identities and how students see themselves in really powerful ways. So what do you hope as teachers that those silhouettes teach us or share with us as teachers to increase the ways we're unleashing learning? What do you want teachers to know from those silhouettes that can support our work in even better ways than we're already doing it?
What I want them to first is to look at the pictures. How many of these students actually put a language in their heart? It's part of who they are. It's very emotional. It's like the students may not feel like I wanted to learn Italian or Greek right now, but that's part of who they are. That's how they feel. So as teachers, one thing is, even if you don't speak the language, encourage your student to continue to learn the languages of their heritage, for example, and to learn from others. And one thing we pick up is that a lot of time, for example, like Tina or other students, that they actually learn a lot of languages or some phrases from their peers. It's from people surrounding them, from their community. So that's part of thinking about teaching and learning in a community.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. It makes me think of Dr. Robert Maloney, because we did an episode with her, and she was talking about the identities of our students, who they are, and language is such a foundational part of who we all are, whether we think about that or not.
I think with that, going back to what you said in the beginning about the starting point where we should get to know our students right from the beginning, and we can use these silhouettes as a tool in which to begin that dialogue and that process. I think that then we indicate to the students immediately as teachers that this is a student-centered classroom.
Yes.
And that we are respecting them, we're respecting their heritage, their backgrounds, and we're looking at ways in which we can provide them in the future. And to sort of guide them to the future, provide them in the present and guide them to the future.
And the sense of inclusiveness.
Yes.
That was so amazing.
Yes.
And belonging too,
Yeah.
when I read it. It's a sense of
And
belonging.
sharing,
Yeah.
inclusive sharing
Fantastic.
stories.
Well, we're just about out of time, so let me do two quick things. One is, can you tell us where we can get this book?
You can get it online for free, but we would like to encourage you to buy a hard copy, because all copyright and royalties will go to the Australian Foundation of Literacy and Numeracy, and that's an amazing charity to help the most disadvantaged student.
Fantastic. So it's online. You could also purchase it and make a difference. So we've got a question for you to end our time, and this is our question for you. So we have students from all different groups and backgrounds, and we want to know, in your classroom or at your school, what are the ways that you're working to affirm student diversity? There's great stuff going out there. What do you do to create a sense of belonging and equal participation, or using students as a starting point? I love that term. So the best conversations take place in our comment section. So go there and add to the wisdom, and our colleagues here might even share some thoughts. And while you're there, grab the Ultimate Classroom Setup Guide. It's our free ebook that's going to help create a sense of belonging. That will show you how to do that as well.
Yeah.
So Di and Alice, I love this book. I think it's so important. I really do. It really helped me think about who my students are in the next level and find ways to link that and really create places where we all can learn and thrive.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
this
you.
interview.
Thank you.
For having us.
And thank you for the work you do for the world. We are cheering you on. We hope this helps, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.